About to begin. My name's Andy Mann. I'm with CA Technologies. I'm going to be the moderator and host for today's lunchtime power panel. So we're talking today on DevOps is even more important than you think. So quick show of hands. Who can define DevOps for me? Okay, we're not going to even try today. But what we're going to do is we're going to have some really interesting people give their ideas of what we can actually do with DevOps, why it's important, where we can go. And I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'll start from the far side here. Monish Sharma is the Vice President of Customer Success at Elasticbox. Next along is Miles Steinhauser, who is Software Development Engineer with Bluebox. Right here we have Victoria Lifshitz, who is the CEO of Qbel. And finally, but not least, Mark Levi, the Senior Product Marketing Manager of Serena Software. So I'm going to go through a few questions, but first of all, I'd like to give the panel just a moment to introduce themselves a little bit more and tell you what they do, why they're here. I'll start with Monish. Monish, tell us a little bit what you do over there at Elasticbox.
Sure. Hello, can everyone hear me? Yeah. So my name is Monish. I'm the Head of Customer Success at Elasticbox. As Head of Customer Success, it's my responsibility to ensure that the prospects and customers we deal with, we're ensuring that they're on track to leverage Elasticbox in its full potential. And what Elasticbox is it's an advanced DevOps platform that really empowers developers and IT ops to develop, deploy, and manage applications on any cloud, private, public, or hybrid. So we really are a multi-tenant integrated tool set that really empowers developers and IT ops to be able to actually reach the goals of what DevOps is really meant for, which is transparency, collaboration, agility, and being able to innovate solutions on top.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So next up, Miles, why don't you tell us a little bit about Bluebox and what you do there?
Yeah, this is Miles. I work for Bluebox, and we build private cloud as a service, which is a hosted private cloud offering. I am one of the engineers. I build OpenStack, I deploy it, I operate it, and operationalize it for you, so it's always up and running, and you just get to consume it. We're based in Seattle. I work in Boston, and if you have more questions about private cloud as a service, I would love to talk, or DevOps, or anything. I love to chat.
Fantastic thing. Now, Victoria, for anyone who didn't catch your keynote, or any of the 3,000 people who weren't at your booth yesterday, maybe you can explain a little bit more about Qbel and what you do there.
Yes, of course. Qbel is enterprise DevOps platform, and I will simply refer to DevOps as automation of everything. And we are looking to help large companies with complex infrastructures to automate every facet of managing applications, from spinning up applications and the environments in which they live, to updating, upgrading, scaling, retiring them, and so forth. At the nutshell, the core of Qbel is the configuration management system that attempts to know everything about what an application is, what an application does, who it talks to, how it depends on the infrastructure, and capture and codify all these dependencies. And once we know that, then the next layer is a configuration change management system, so that we can actually apply strict trigger policies and rules of how application changes, which is what happens when you scale something, or you roll out new tenant, or update or upgrade some piece of the system. And then finally, on the outset, there is a collaborative portal that has a DevOps interface for people who create policies, create components, create buttons, if you will. And then there is a whole lot of people in the organization who are button users, that all they want to know about the system is where to press launch, and where to press upgrade, and where to say destroy, I'm already done with it. So that's in a nutshell what Qbel does.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Mark, if anyone's been under a rock for the last 5 or 10 years, Serena Software, well known in the industry. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and what they do?
Thanks, Andy. Mark Levy, Product Marketing. Thank you, everybody, for spending some time with us today. And Serena Software basically helps companies develop and deploy better software. In a nutshell, we really focus on large enterprises with large infrastructures, and what we're really want to support the DevOps movement, help people automate that deployment pipeline, and more efficiently drive change from the change request all the way into the business value.
Brilliant, thank you. Just occurs to me, this is a little bit like Between Two Ferns, the Zach Galifianakis thing, except maybe it's an extended edition, I don't know. We're going to have a good time with this, people. It's the last session in this big room. And now, Mark, I'm going to stay with you for a moment. Why DevOps? Yeah, why would you do DevOps? We've been doing things in IT pretty well all along, right? Right?
Well, something's got to change. DevOps, in some respects, is a reaction. And it's a reaction that business is under more competitive pressure. There's more demand from the business to drive change faster and more efficiently because the marketplace is just getting much more competitive. And IT, DevOps, it really was, like I said, a reaction. They just celebrated 5 years of DevOps days just recently, and it was a reaction saying, hey, we can do things better. And there was a bunch of patterns and practices that are starting to develop organizationally, culturally, automation, measurement, sharing, to enable IT to sort of increase agility and deliver ultimately business value. It's about
I think that's absolutely true. And the DevOps Days, Ghent, was fabulous. I was there. Big shout out to Patrick. If anyone hasn't been to a DevOps Days, you should really go. It's really interesting stuff. So I'd have to agree with you. I think it's important to do DevOps, whatever that actually means. But how do you do it? And maybe, Victoria, you can touch on this. Who drives DevOps? Does it come from the bottom up? Does it come from the top down? Does the CIO need to get involved? I mean, where does this come from?
Well, I think that's an awesome question, and part of it is it depends. Every organization seems to be trying to find its way through that in different ways. The general trend that we observe is that the IT czars, the CIOs, seem to be the followers, not the leaders of the movements in the first 5 years, and I think that is what's fundamentally changing. I see CIOs are sort of stop being on the fence around automation, around clouds, and see it as their roles as the technology leaders in the next 5 years to really take charge of creating automation and making clouds inhabitable by applications and usable by people. So I think IT has a lot to say in how DevOps and automation happens with the governance and efficiencies and controls in mind.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to follow up with that. And being the engineer in the house compared to all of these guys, it's been interesting for me seeing it crossing organizations. It seems very bottom up, especially the last 5 years, as you mentioned. And so coming bottom up and top down, the middle has to compress at some point, and they have to pay attention. We have to make progress and get things done. And so that's, I think, what we're going to start seeing it more and more is these organizations, as they're scaling out and they're understanding there's less risk here, and there's so much more value that you can deliver to your engineers, to your business, because that's what we're here for. And we're going to see that just explode in value propositions.
And to add to that, I managed tech ops for the last 17 years of my career, so I have some personal experience here with this space. And what I can tell you is that it needs to be both. It needs to be top down as well as bottoms up, because you need to have a sponsor that's going to actually create that culture of transparency and risk taking, so that people are incentivized to collaborate and are incentivized to be able to innovate and remove latency in that innovation stream so that you can get faster to market. But it also needs to be bottoms up, so you really need architects and sponsors who are coming in from the development community and people in the IT ops community that share those values, so that then you can actually permeate that culture across the different silos that currently exist in tech ops.
Yeah, look, I think it's a really good point. And by the way, bottoms up is like saying cheers in where I come from, so I'll take you up on that at the bar later on. Hey, look, I just want to stay on that a little bit, though. We're talking about technicians and architects and CIOs and CTOs, and that's all well and good. But what about other people in the business? I know I was in a session yesterday talking about how one of the issues that one person has with DevOps is it's about dev and ops, and it doesn't involve, say, the customer. So, Miles, maybe you might take us through. What about the customer? What about the business? What about other stakeholders? Does DevOps apply to them?
Exactly. So if you look back at where DevOps came from and kind of the history that we're seeing it, to the original Velocity conference talk of 2009 from Allspa, and that's where it starts at, but they were saying this is just the beginning, and that's what we're seeing right now. It's 5 years in. How do we actually expand this out to the rest of the business? How do we turn these values, create streams, and cross-cut just these silos that we're doing, go straight from customers, bring in everybody that is involved in the product, that gets it in the door, out the door, finance, so you have the full picture, because that's the only way to deliver a full value service. You need everybody involved in part of it.
Now, sorry, Monish.
Yeah, I was going to say that actually this is where IT ops and CIOs can actually leverage the customer perspective to really make changes in their organization. Because if you can build a cycle of getting customer feedback in your application stream as you deploy it, you're able to then influence through the customer your organization and make it very objective rather than very opinion-based, which could come across if it is an issue or a thing that a CIO is trying to push. But if you bring the customer perspective in, you can leverage it to say that this is what the business requires. And indeed, customers want to give feedback. They want to give their perspective to how the application should look and feel for them.
Actually, what's interesting, sorry, is you mentioned feedback, and one of the practices of DevOps is continuous delivery, and the whole idea is to take the slack out of the system and provide this feedback. And now the feedback, one, you want to fail fast. It says, you want to fail as fast as possible so you can get better and get continuous improvement. And you mentioned feedback from the customer to be for innovation, for features. You need to know whether that feature is right or wrong, and you get that feedback from the customer. Continuous delivery and this whole DevOps movement helps improve and pull the slack out of the system so you can provide that feedback. Very important point.
So to me, DevOps, the means to an end is to enable all that automation so that we can reduce cycle times, so that organizations can absolutely compress the time it goes from the business idea to the quick implementation to the idea in the hands of the customers, to measure the customer impact, and then decide it's a means of managing your product lineup, essentially, as opposed to being on the tail end of the customer engagement comes after you design the product. No, it allows you to design a product around the customer. And so in some sectors of the industry we work with, for example, retail, the ultimate customer isn't so much a customer with their organization, it's really a CMO, right? IT in some sense, like .coms, they report to CMO because it's the guy responsible for selling the product who really is in pain because he needs to go fast, he needs to react to new mobile interfaces, social interfaces, new channels, globalization. There's a ton of opportunities. They want to drive the business, they want to win the market share, but the IT tends to be more of a reactive force, not letting him go as fast as he can. So getting that reversed is, I think, one of the main reasons why this is all of a sudden so important to everybody.
Yeah, and we hear a lot about the alignment of the CMO and the CIO, the alignment of the EVP of sales with the CIO or the CTO, and it sounds like this is a bit of an extension of that. This is just a good business practice.
Absolutely. At Elasticbox, we believe that if we can enable IT as a service to basically then be able to walk lock and step with the development team, then we've actually removed that latency. We've created that stream of minimizing the delay of provisioning infrastructure as a service, and basically provide value where it's currently needed, which is on the platform as a service side, so that you can deploy your applications faster, you can actually orchestrate them, manage them, and have one single pane of glass where you can actually see that transparency so that you can also collaborate and make efficiency improvements.
Yeah, so now, this sounds expensive. I know we're talking about getting all sorts of people involved, we're changing process, we're changing culture, we're changing organizations, we're probably buying some software. And Victoria, I'll turn it to you first. You're a CEO of a company, you started a number of companies, you're deeply connected to the financial side of what's going on in the world. How do you talk to the CFO about this? Is there additional cost? Is there ROI? How do you address the cost side of this?
It's a great question. And speaking about bottom-up versus top-down, when technologies get adopted bottom-up, which is what the DevOps movement was all about in the first years, developers bring open-source technology, and it kind of sneaks up on the company in some sense. And it's years before CFO actually uncovers that there is that thing that actually runs its company, right? Kind of a problem with the SaaS and the open source from a CFO perspective. When it comes top-down, it's a massive process re-engineering effort. And companies are starting to understand that that's what it is. And of course, CFO is involved, and COO is involved, and CIO is involved. That's actually part of the reason why it's sometimes hard to get this kind of a program started, because there doesn't seem to be a very simple way. The business benefits are tremendous, but it does require buy-in across multiple organizations. So there comes a time fairly fast where the CFO wants to know the numbers. And it quickly comes down to how can we prove value. Of course, automation is great. great, faster, everything, we are in. But how do we qualify it? How do we quantify it? How much will it cost me? How soon will I get a return? And I think there is also growing frustration on the part of the companies who, in fact, had been investing for the last 5 years in DevOps and automation. And from the perspectives of many executives that I talk to, it's a bottomless pit. It keeps eating more and more and more money. DevOps teams are starting to spring here and there, and then they start grow, and then they grow in headcount, and they always justify why they wrote so many scripts, but there is so many more to be written. And now we've done this as an industry long enough that the executives are starting to wonder, what does it really mean in the greater scheme of things? And so I think there is a just general hunger in the industry for hard numbers, for blueprints, for the recipes of how we actually measure impact on automation. Part of it is the bottom line. There is definite efficiency in terms of how much support personnel you need, right? How many people are actually manually designing or implementing systems today that will be completely displaced by automation? But the biggest benefit is actually to the top line, which means how do you qualify that you brought your product to the market in 6 months, not in 12 months? Well, we got to get better at being able to qualify these things.
Yeah, following up with that, I'd definitely follow that. One of the key tenets of this whole DevOps initiative is looking at how do you measure everything? How do you quantify your actual advances that you're making? And not just at the application and systems level, but into the business. I mean, this is, at the end of the day, we're all about the business. We're here to create a successful product and actually keep moving forward. So you need to have key metrics, and that's at all levels. The application's up and running responsibly. What's the customer experience like? What's the incoming actual customer orders and registration processes? What's the business return? And can anybody see that? Do you have different dashboards and perspectives for those people and what they need and the information that they're looking for to continue moving day to day?
So one of the things is, and very good points, and it's sort of also, how do you start? How do you start to do this? And one of the first things you need to do is go talk to the business, right? You need to go talk to the business and ask them how to measure, what kind of metrics are they interested in? What is going to give them quantifiable results on that as well? So go talk to the business. If you saw Damon Edwards' presentation, I'm sure he talked about operational efficiencies through lean and value stream mapping. Those are, again, operational efficiencies that you can wring out. You've mentioned it, Victoria, on internal costing savings. We had customers that were using very expensive DBAs to do 5 deployments a day, expensive resources. They're able to pull that out and just have basic managers, one button deploys. Those are good, but ultimately it's to the business.
And the things that this level of automation need to fix is just the amount of system outages, the amount of bugs that get to production or get caught in a late stage of the testing instead of being caught actually right at the time that the change is committed.
Yeah, this idea of shift left, right? Moving the whole timeline left, bringing
right.
testing further forward
right.
in the project. Miles, I mean, have you had experience of this whole idea of shift left, of being able to bring testing forward, to be able to do better engineering? Because, yeah, we've got to pay attention to quality.
Well, and absolutely. A lot of these legacy organizations, you have the silos that go from development, they throw it over the wall of confusion, if you will, to QA, over the wall of confusion to ops, and you get all the feedback cycle going up through this actual organizational chain and not directly through the resources at hand. And so you see tools coming out like Vagrant, VirtualBox, and Packer, and all these working together to bring your actual production environment that's virtualized in the cloud to the developer's workstation. So as they're writing code, it's sitting there in the exact environment that will be deployed to production. You're running it through Jenkins and other DevOps-style tools that are spinning these things up continually so you can run all of your tests. So a developer pushes a commit, it runs through Jenkins, you execute all the tests, and you want to have a fast feedback and fast fail cycle. So as soon as that commit hits a bug, let the developer know. They're going to maintain that context. They can fix that bug right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this all sounds like a lot of stuff. Okay, we've got payback, right? I mean, there's definitely ROI. We've done research at CA Technologies about the ROI, the payback, faster time to market, better quality software, being able to release software you could not actually do before, which I think is really interesting when you talk about competitive advantage and bringing the business into this conversation. But where do you start? And Mark, I might ask you to address this first. What do you actually do to get moving with this DevOps thing? How do you, and I'll put this in air quotes, do
DevOps? Yeah, well, big question, and you know, do you boil the ocean or do you start incrementally? You know, and you sort of, I sort of say you got to do DevOps on DevOps, right? Meaning, and this sort of borrows from Lean. I believe the people that I've seen implement it successfully start incrementally. You can do it and work on a couple different levels. We mentioned, you know, you got to need executive sponsorship. You need to work culturally. So one thing is working with how many people have dev teams on call for deployments. You know, that's a good best practice. What kind of warranty periods that dev teams offer. So some cultural things that you can work on. You know, again, think of small batch loads. Okay, so and version everything and small batch loads. So version 1 of your DevOps implementation might include, you know, taking the things that you deploy the most often and pull the friction out of that on a people and an automation perspective. Implement a certain amount of best practices. Gain credibility in your organization, make sure it's measurable, you know, show the proof, and then move on to the next version. That's one way to look at it.
Victoria, yeah.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I think there is the best place to start is adding value there where there is none, right? Take a problem that exists today that you just cannot solve without DevOps, go attack that problem, and then spread from there. I think there is 2 areas where we see consistently where there is dire need for doing things better. And one is surprise on the ops side, and one is on the dev side. So on the ops side, it's about continuous deployment. It's about people who are responsible for managing infrastructure, and they have these changes from the application coming down the pike and doing it increasingly more and more often, more and more rapidly. And you really can no longer make changes manually by hand. That's just you know, spiral to death at this rate of change. So there is a lot of need to come in and put the automation of how one-button upgrades to production happen. The other kind of a choking point is about the speed and agility, is everybody is now getting that agile is the right way to do things, and continuous integration is the first practice that they need to put in place. So continuous build server, something like Jenkins or CloudBee. But once you build it, you really want to go and test it. And in order to test it, you need ability to create these dynamic test environments, which you create them, and you run the test, and then 5 minutes later you need to run the next test and the next test. And as long as you do it in a static physical test infrastructure, you kind of lost the battle there. So coming in and doing the extension of a continuous integration, taking from continuous integration to continuous delivery, by delivering all that logistics of infrastructure on demand for dev test is kind of the other one. Both can be funded separately. Both can be funded as a project. You can start with one team that is working on one part of the feature of the product, and let's say let's automate them. And from that vantage point, you can then spread.
It amazes me that a lot of the companies, even today, they have some element of continuous integration happening with Jenkins or some other TFS or some other type of you know, configuration, continuous integration server, but they're still not doing continuous delivery. And with all the technologies that are in place today, there is really no excuse not to. At ElasticBox, continuous delivery is actually one of our key use cases. We have our own ElasticBox Jenkins plugin that actually allows you to replicate your production environment across your dev, test, QA, pre-prod environments, where you can actually build a workflow or an entire stream, where you can have things get triggered one after another, where you want to have tests run, an entire replication of your production environment deployed, tested, and you can then decide if you want to merge that into your main branch. So really, there is no reason not to think about continuous delivery as the first thing that you should tackle and gain success over.
I actually want to follow up a little bit also in that, you know, why are we doing all this? What value are we bringing to the developers and the operations guys? And if any of you are developers or operations, I can fully attest to this, that I like to solve creative, complex problems for the business, and I don't want to deploy code manually, you know, once a week or whatever the business needs. And that's really what we're trying to get to, what we're trying to free up is how do you solve that next generation of problems that the business is coming down to, the CMO is offering, saying, this is what our customers, they're asking for, how do we do this?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's not just about solving problems for, you know, the development and operation girls and guys, but also up chain and down chain, you know, upstream and downstream. I mean, does DevOps start with the development team, or does it start earlier? Does it start with the product manager? Does it start with even the sales leadership or CMO? And where does it finish? It doesn't finish with operations, does it? I mean, does anyone want to grab on that one?
I think it's, we were talking about it, I think, beforehand, too. And Patrick Dubois, you know, the godfather of DevOps, had a really good blog post. And he talked about this idea of DevOps, of taking operational knowledge and embedding it into development, okay, which is good, and taking development knowledge and embedding it into ops and having that understanding. But he said that in a broader, you know, removing the barriers of the silos between dev and ops, that's all good. But what about HR and finance? So you can take this as a model, as an operational model, okay, which we are proving successful, and you should be able to map it further into the enterprise. And I think that is a model that can be leveraged, because ultimately, organizationally, with silos, and I think Damon Edwards mentioned it in his presentation, is a big inhibitor to throughput. And it's all about throughput. It's all about getting the business idea, you know, building the business idea and creating the value to the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've talked a little bit about what it is and where to start. We've gotten some software involved, some technology. We've talked a lot about process, right? The flow, and you mentioned that, Mark. Yeah. The idea of speeding the flow of ideas into reality. Well, you know, ideas to the customer, really, isn't it?
Right.
But talk to me a little bit about the people, because this is really important. We haven't really touched on this a lot. You know, the women and the men in technology have certain attitudes, they've got certain skills, they're built around maybe ITIL and ITSM. The wall of confusion, that gap between operations and development, they're comfortable with that. How do we address that? Surely, Miles, we have to address that, right? The people, the culture.
Yeah, we absolutely do have to address it. And so culture is one of these things that's also been kind of tagged along under the DevOps umbrella, if you will. And it's really about collaboration. You know, people, getting them to talk to each other. Somebody mentioned it earlier at the conference. You know, have small teams. Jeff Bezos talks about the 2 pizza sizing. And so if you can feed everybody with 2 pizzas, you should go no larger than that. As well as just trading off developers and operations guys, and even just cross-team developers, you know, opening the door, so to speak, so when they're walking down the hallway, they can just say hi and, hey, you know, you're somebody else in the company, you're somebody else that's here. Especially when there's a problem or they need something done, they can go talk to them. They're very approachable. So it's knocking down those walls and those barriers for cross-team and cross-functional communication.
Anyone else want to jump on culture and people?
Yes, so one of the things that DevOps and test-driven development is pushing for is expertise that hasn't existed before. And we need people in massive numbers. I kind of think that there is, you know, 3 types of unicorns, if you will, that are now massive bottlenecks, just from the enterprise perspective of massive trends that are going on. And one is these DevOps people. They kind of have to have a head of an engineer, a software developer, because he is writing code to control things, but he needs to have a background of a sysadmin and somebody who understands the networks and the hardware and the policies. And that's just not something that traditionally was combined, to very different philosophical bases between developers and ops guys. So somehow we need to take some of the developers who go in that space and some of the ops people who go in that space, and ultimately we'll have to breed a generation of people through colleges and training programs. The other unicorn is dev test, right? So the people who are now responsible for writing code that tests the code. And again, they have to combine the discipline of QA with the methods that are typical of the software developers. And this is not exactly in a topic, but I think the third one is a data scientist. It's another thing that doesn't exist. But everything is going analytics, and DevOps is going analytics, and product management is getting more and more based on the data that you get from the market of how people use your product. So how do we solve the problem? That's a really, really, really tough one. And part of it is programs, and part of it is universities got to catch up. Part of it, we have to actually elevate the status. The good thing that's going for us is DevOps is getting cool, and so developers want to do DevOps. They don't quite get with the dev test quite as much. So anything that we could do to create the era of that being a very cool thing to do is I think is gonna help.
Yeah, good one. And sorry, Monish.
Yeah, I mean, DevOps is definitely about people first, right? And it's all about people collaborating, sharing ideas, increasing the rate of exchange of ideas. So that you're driving towards innovation, you're driving towards agility, you're driving towards transparency. The challenge or the irony is that a lot of the developer community and the IT ops community tend to be very, very analytical people. and they rather communicate over chat or over messaging or email rather than talk to each other face to face. So rather than getting the people to adapt to a different set of behavior and getting them to physically talk with each other, I also think that there's also this thing that has to evolve where the tooling has to be in place, where people can almost do Google Docs-like sharing and be able to communicate at every level or every layer of the application development food chain. So collaboration has to be sort of built into whatever tool or whatever application you want to use to enable a DevOps culture.
Yeah. Now, and just quickly, I think we need a glossary of DevOps, just backtracking a little bit. The two-pizza team is a very important concept, although I know some teams where you couldn't feed the managers with 2 pizzas, so we have to address that. The unicorn versus the horse, this is another key concept in DevOps. The unicorn is a special magical creature that happens just one-off. And we talk about people like companies like Netflix or Google or Facebook as being unique in what they're able to do, as unicorns rather than horses. We talk about the enterprises as horses. And I know, Victoria, on your sign in your booth, it says Enterprise DevOps. And that's something I want to touch on. It's something I've been talking about a lot recently. Now, Mark, you work with enterprises as well. Do they want to? Do these enterprise horses want to be unicorns? Do they want to be like unicorns? Yeah. Do they just want to wear a horn on their head and pretend they're unicorns? Is this a reality?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because and it goes back to continuous delivery. I mean, in some of these enterprises, it's really about getting from point A to B, and they have these calcified, organizations and structures, and maybe continuous delivery is almost aspirational, but it's the journey. And their horses, they want to definitely be better. They want to be better and faster horses. Do they want to transition to a unicorn? I'm not sure whether that's even possible to some of these guys. But clearly, they have the same needs, and they're in the same marketplace to solve these problems. And so they definitely want to leverage a lot of these patterns and best practices. We've talked about infrastructure as code and continuous delivery, but they need to adapt it because they're dealing with a legacy infrastructure, new infrastructures. It's much broader and deeper. So they have different problems to solve, but ultimately they want that same value.
Well, I don't see them as horses and unicorns, so somehow creatures of different sort entirely. Well, maybe Google and Netflix and Amazon are magically successful. But what's important is that they are successful. What's also important is that their success is predicates on capturing this web model of digitally dealing with consumers, right? Digitally relating to their customers. And now they are looking to capture this magic that they have created over the last decade and a half of knowing how to deal with people digitally, and they are on a massive web grabbing, right? So now if you're a traditional enterprise, it's not your choice. Do you actually want to be like Amazon or like Google? You're competing with them. And whether you like it or not, and you might not go after their market, but they sure are coming after yours. And with their ability to deliver innovation at this massive speed, you either match them on agility, and then you go head to head and you actually defend your territory or will against us, or you'll be history. So I don't think it's something that is a choice at all, but I think that there is some very wonderful practices that were developed and piloted by the Google, Netscapes, and LinkedIns of the world, and now it's just going to the mainstream. So we are seeing mass adoption of things that originated in a web technology space, and now being adopted everywhere.
Yeah, look, I think we're really onto something. We look at the Silicon Valley startups and so forth, and we never see them clamoring to do ITIL. But we see the big enterprises clamoring to do DevOps. So I think we've got to be onto something there. Look, we've only got a few minutes left. I want to go down the line and just do a couple of quick fire answers from each of you in turn. Firstly, give me one best practice for someone who's in the audience online, watching the video later on, trying to figure out, well, what is this thing? What do I do? Give me one best practice that you think you'd want people to learn about and maybe look up more information on when they've finished watching this. Monish, I'll start with you.
I'd say definitely look at continuous delivery, because that's your first step towards being able to pivot to your customer requirements. If you're able to release code in smaller chunks, release often, be able to test the market, get feedback, and being able to pivot and address the market needs, you're going to have a leg up against your competition. And if you're not doing that, somebody else is, and they're going to have a leg up over you. So you want to get to that stage first. And yeah, definitely look at continuous delivery, and that's a space that Elasticbox actually excels in as well. So have a look at our website.
Miles.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that you need to check into your monitoring. Look at the new monitoring solutions that are out there and determine how you can actually do your KPIs across the entire organization, not just for your dev and ops deliverables, but between organizations, and figure out what's that handoff time look like and where are your bottlenecks.
Victoria?
Dynamic environments. Whenever you're looking at the system, ask the question, where is the lunch button? And if I had one, what would it look like? What does it take to press the button, get one more, and one more after that? And once you have a lunch button, ask the question, well, where is it delete or destroy? Do I actually have any idea if I ever need to take this system offline? What's affected? So go through the exercise and you will get some very surprising insights as to what it is that you have and how you run things and how you would do that if you had this launch and destroy buttons. Once you know why you would want them, you'll figure out how to get them.
And Mark?
I think first, follow the flow. Understand where you're at today. Make sure you have that mapped out. You understand your lead times. You can make a lot of improvements right out of the box by just understanding where your process is today and where your waste is. Start eliminating the waste.
I'm going to throw my own in here. Test and QA automation. A huge bottleneck. You talk about flow and about accelerating delivery, using technologies maybe like service virtualization, automated build, test-driven development. But these, automate the activities that happen within test so that these things are happening not just faster, but better, and you're finding more bugs before you get to prod. Yeah, okay, great. Now, the one other question I want to go down the line on and ask you each is, the audience here has to go to work tomorrow. The people online, they probably have to go back to work after lunch. Where everyone's excited about DevOps. I think you've all said some really good things to get people excited about DevOps. But what can people go out and do tomorrow to start this process in their organization? Whether they're a unicorn or a horse, a big company, a small company, there are some things that you can go and do. And I'll start, and I'll just say, ban email on Friday between development and operations, right? Make them actually talk to each other. Realize each other are human beings. Communication, I think, is a really big part of DevOps, and I think it's a really good place to start. But I'll start at this end of the line this time. Mark, one thing that you can actually go out and do tomorrow to start getting this DevOps train rolling.
Yeah, I would probably say go talk to the business. Talk to the business and try and understand what the issues, what they're trying to do, what KPIs they're using, how they're being measured, and try and find out how you can support them.
Victoria.
People and organizations learn best by doing, so identify a project. Just come back to the office and think about where can I pick one team and make a difference.
That's great. That's great. Miles?
Yeah, and if you're a developer, go talk to your ops team. I got to echo what you said, Andy. It's definitely between them, open that lines of communication, and not just on Friday. Any day of the week, any day of the weekend if you happen to be friends, and you'll probably become them. So if you're dev, go talk to ops. If you're ops, go talk to dev. If you're either, go talk to the business.
And Manish?
I'd say look at your current business processes and workflows and really ask the question why. Why does it take our organization several days to be able to deploy code to production? Now, why does it take me several hours or days to be able to procure an environment that I can actually test something on, or I can try a new framework on, or a new application that I want to experiment with? Why does that happen? Why is our strategy so flawed? Why is it that it's always a huge amount of effort to get anything done? And then start reading the blogs of people who are proposing solutions, because these solutions do exist.
Yeah, fantastic. These are some really good ideas. Everyone should look at least one, if not all of these ideas. Tomorrow is Friday. It's a day for action. We can take some advice there. Okay, just to wrap up, I just want to find out where we can get more information from each of you. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there, and you mentioned Patrick Dubois' blog. I believe that's Jedi.be. A great source of information. Obviously, the DevOps Summit website, the Cloud Expo website, fantastic places for lots and lots of thought leaders putting lots of good content out there. But I'll start maybe with Manish. Tell me what your website is as well, and anywhere else that you think we can go to find some good information on DevOps.
Sure. So elasticbox.com, there's a lot of documentation on all the 6 different use cases. We support fast repeatable deployments, service catalog, collaboration, hybrid cloud deployments, workload mobility, and CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery. You can find documentation on this on elasticbox.com/documentation, as well as elasticbox.com/blog. So you can read all about us there.
Super. Miles?
Yeah, check us out at bluebox.net. We've got all of our cloud offerings there, where self-service delivery and cloud platform as you need, as well as hit me up on Twitter, M.A. Steinhauser. I love Twitter. That's how I've learned and dove into all this stuff. If you're not using it, check it out. It's not just for tweets between friends.
Victoria?
Qbel.com. That's our corporate site. This is where we have information about our success stories and architectures and links to the product documentation. Also self-sign-up. Qbel is SaaS, so you can go and register for a free account, and there's a quick start guide that gives you 5 steps to go up and running and deploy your first applications on the clouds. Also follow me on Twitter, @VLifshitz, or our corporate blog, which is at Qbel Inc.
Super. Mark?
So we're at Srinu.com. We have a lot of great information about DevOps there. But here's what I do. I like to go to DevOpsDays.org. All their past events. They have their agenda there. A lot of times they have presentations, or I'll take their presentation name and search SlideShare. They post a lot of stuff. So you get a lot of great stuff there. And I tell you, if you haven't gone to a DevOps Days, go. It's a lot of fun. I do that. And meetups are awesome, so I search meetups in various areas. I was looking for some DevOps experts in the DC area since I'm going to visit there. I looked at meetups in DC, and I met some great people talking about audit and compliance and continuous delivery right there. So there's some great avenues there. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, really good recommendations. And for me, for CA Technologies, ca.com/DevOps. Obviously, you can follow me on Twitter as well, ANDIMANN. The other thing, talking about Twitter, check out the hashtag DevOps. A lot of great conversation. There's a really strong community, very open, very interested in talking and sharing ideas. So definitely, Twitter, I think, is a fantastic location. Look, that's all we have time for. I want to thank Monish, Miles, Victoria, and Mark for coming along. I want to thank you all for coming along to this final lunchtime session. Don't go away. We're going to have a quick wrap-up, but I'd like you to quickly give me a round of applause for our attendees on DevOps today.